Welcome to DCOM Network. I'm Dave, and as promised, this is the custom window Chrome video for WPF, and I'm going to take you through the required steps to create custom window Chrome from the actual code to the XAML, and then we'll finally see the final product at the end of the video. Time constraints, I'm going to try and keep the video under 30 minutes, closer to the 20-minute mark, so a lot of the code I will be pasting from code snippets, but I will explain kind of what the code does and why it's there. And then at the end of the video, I will also provide a link to go download the code so you could already have a demo project to kind of work from and see the final output. So there's a few main parts to how this works. The first part is the actual XAML. We have to create a control template for our window. This will be reusable for all of our different windows, and it needs to be flexible enough to have some of the behaviors of a normal window, like in the operating system, whether we can resize it or if it's a fixed window, things like that. And then the other side is we're going to do a lot of code. We can't do a lot of the things in XAML because there's some limitations that prevent us from completing this functionality. So we'll have to do a lot of that code, but that's fine. It turns out quite nicely. So let's dig right in. We're going to go ahead and create a resource dictionary, and this is going to actually contain our window styles. We're going to call this themed window style. And just so you know, based on feedback in the previous videos of the font being a little small, I bumped it up from 10 to 11. So hopefully that will help some of you who've had trouble seeing the font. I record these videos at 1920 by 1080, so I can see how the font might be a little small on smaller resolutions. So I bumped it up for you guys, and we'll see how that works out. So the first thing that we need to do is, of course, we're going to create a style, or we're going to say, this is for the window, and we're going to give it a name, and we're going to call this themed window style. And we are actually going to also create a local namespace. And what's the namespace for this project? Custom window Chrome demo. And in our Solution Explorer, we are going to create a new class, and we're going to call this themed window. And this needs to be a public class that derives directly from the window class. And let's just go ahead and compile this project briefly. And then we're going to say our target type is actually of our themed window. So this should compile, and it does. So now we're going to set a few basic properties just to kind of set up our success here. We need to have a transparent window for this to work. We are actually really working with a borderless window is kind of the magic behind all of this. So we need to make it a transparent window that allows transparency. And actually, it doesn't have to be a transparent background, but the window does need to support transparency. I just wanted to clarify that. Some other things to make it compliant with our standard Windows behavior in the operating system. We're going to set the minimum width. I don't know what the actual value in Windows is, but we're going to set ours to 100. And we're going to do the same thing with our height. And then we are going to set our window style to borderless. Okay, and now we can actually do our template. And this is where the core of our magic happens here. So we're going to set our value, and we're going to do control template. And again, our type for our template will be our themed window class. And then we'll give this a name, and we'll call this part window template. So why did I give a name of part window template? There's a function in WPF called get template child, and that's kind of the magic on how we interact between our code and the XAML. We're not going to use any bindings. There's limitations on certain functionality that we need. We can't use bindings. There's certain events that we have to hook up to. So the kind of magic behind that is using get template child in our code to actually get a reference to some of our XAML parts, and we're going to do that by naming them part underscore and then the name of the window part. So we're going to actually create a grid, and we're going to call this part window frame. And basically what we're doing with this control template is we are going to define several parts of the window, such as the borders, the content area, the title, the caption, the image, icon, things like that. So we're going to break this up into a series of columns and rows. And we need 3 columns, one for the left-hand borders, one for the content, and one for the right-hand borders. So we're going to actually do that here. So our left and right borders will each be 4 pixels wide, and then our content will fill the rest of that gap. Same thing with the caption area. Next, we're going to have some row definitions. And kind of the same concept, except we're going to have 4 rows. The very top and the very bottom rows are, of course, our borders. The second row is going to be our caption area, basically our title bar where we can drag our window around. And then, of course, the third one is also the content. So you can see that here and here. Next, we actually need to define all of our borders. Let's clean this up and create some spacing. And we really want, for our border, I'm just going to make this EC. It's kind of a gray color for the border. And let's actually go up here and let's say, let's do this. Let's do style resources, and let's go ahead and create a solid color brush. We'll name this border brush. We will give it a color. There we go. And then what we will do down here is we'll actually just say animate resource, and then we will say border brush. And we are going to name this window border left. And we're going to do grid column 0, row 1, and it will have a row span of 2. And basically we're going to do the same thing for the rest of the borders, and basically we want to go through and create each border. So we're going to have top right, bottom left, top right, bottom left will be each of our borders. Okay. Next is we actually need our caption area. So we're going to say part window caption. And the caption is actually broken down into several different parts. We have the icon, the text, the rest of the area, and then our 3 caption buttons for minimize, maximize, and close. So this is going to be in column 1, which is actually our second column, and row 1. Caption background, let's make this blue. And again, we will actually do this through a brush, and then we will have a, we will actually do this. So, let's see, associated key. So that should actually be called key. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to create a brush resource. Okay, so we have our caption background, and let's actually call the brush. There we go. So inside our border, I'm going to use dock panel. You don't have to. Basically, we just want to lay out the icon, the text, and then our caption buttons. And to do this, I'm going to use dock panel. You can probably do this various different ways. And then I'm going to use a stack panel. I'm going to dock this to the right, horizontal orientation, vertical line of center. And this is where we're actually going to have our caption buttons, such as close, and maximize, and minimize. So we are going to do button, and this will be part, window, caption. We'll start with minimize. For the text of our button, let's just use something simple. We'll use an underscore to signify that we're going to minimize the window. And then there's a couple other things that we need to do. There's a couple converters that we are going to create, but we will get to that. Let's go ahead and do that now. We'll get that out of it. Let's get the XAML completely done. What we want to do is, based on whether or not we can minimize the window, we want to hide or display the minimize button. So standard window behavior in the operating system. So we're going to have a couple converters that do that. So we are going to have our button visibility. So let's actually put our content down here. Let's say visibility is equal to, we'll bind this to the Windows resize mode. And we're going to say we'll have a converter, which will be a static resource, and this will be a minimize visibility converter. And we're going to do the same thing for maximize and close as well. So, all right. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to create a couple other buttons. Let's give a margin on this button of a 4-pixel margin to the right, just to give it some spacing between the rest of the buttons. We're going to paste this a few times. We're going to call this part window caption button, or maximize button, and then we'll have the same thing here. So we'll call this the close button. I would maximize and then close. And we'll create these converters here in a moment. So, and for the last one, we don't need a margin on the very last one. Let's just use an X for close. And then for maximize on this one, we will just use 2 brackets in the meantime. Works for me. Okay. So again, we're not going to hook up any commands or anything like that. And the last thing we need to do is go outside of our stack panel, and we need to create our icon and our text. So we're going to call this window caption text. This will be docked to the left instead of the right. Let's give it a 6-pixel margin from the left to give it some spacing from the edge of the window, and then we'll remove the padding on the text block. Now we need 2 components here. We need our window icon, which will be our image, and this will be part window caption icon, and this will have a width of 16 and a height of 16. And again, we'll give this a padding of 6 pixels to the right to give it some space between the icon and the text. And then finally, we need to declare the source. So let's break these up onto their own lines here. So source, and this will also be a template binding to our icon property on the window. And we're going to go ahead and snap the device pixels. We're going to alias the edges of our icon just to make it look pretty. And we're done with our image, and now we need the text. So this will be just an inline run with an alignment of center. And again, the text will be a template binding to our window title with a foreground we will do a dynamic resource to, let's create a brush up here, solid color brush. Brush, and this will be white, a white color. So caption foreground brush, and that's really all we need for our text. Now the last thing we actually need is for our image, though. Well, okay, so for our image and our text, now we actually need to make a few triggers. So based on whether or not our window is, let me describe it this way, based on whether or not we have an icon set on our window, we want to move our window caption text either to the left 16 pixels. So basically we want to collapse the icon. So if we don't provide a window icon, we don't want the text floating 16 pixels off to the right. We want it to be close to the left-hand side of the caption. So to do that, we need to create a couple triggers. And before we do that, let's not forget about our content. So for our content, we are actually going to say grid.row 2, column 2, and we want to have a content presenter. So our window content will be in the expanded region. Now we need to create our control template triggers. So we're going to say control triggers. Now this will be our window caption icon. And again, we're going to base this off whether or not we actually have an icon set. So if our icon is null, we want to actually collapse the icon area, so we don't need it to take up that space if there's nothing there. So we're going to collapse that so the text can again move over to the left, and then what we can do is for our window caption text, we can set our margin. Because our text previously has a 6 pixel margin to the left, we are actually going to set that to 0. Okay, and that pretty much concludes our control template resource. The gist of it is we're just defining the core parts of the window that we need to work with and the overall styling of the window. So however you want your window to look like will be completely defined by this control template. So modify it as you see fit. So you could do custom shaped windows, all the different colors you want, layout, it's completely up to you. The important factors are just these window parts that we have defined. So at this point, we're actually going to move on and we can start doing code. Again, to try and keep this video short, a lot of the code here will be from code snippets that I have saved. I'll explain what they do, of course. The code I think is pretty straightforward. There's about 300 lines or so, actually about 390. To be specific, some of that is just some Win32 structures, but a lot of it is just the logic for borders, resizing the window, and just hooking up to events. So it's pretty straightforward. So let's jump right into that as well. The first thing that we are going to need is there's a couple fields that we have to define. One of them is restore top, and I'll explain that as we go further along in the video. We also need one called, whoops, cursor offset. This will track the location of our mouse pointer. And then we need some additional fields to store the location of our border elements, references to our actual borders in a XAML. And then for our captions, these are actually buttons that we defined. So we'll need references to those, and then our window handle. We also need to create our constructor because we need to do some work in here. So in source initialized, we are actually going to register our window handle. So really what we're going to do here is create a new instance of our window interrupt helper, which lives in system_windows.interrupt, pass an instance to our window, and then grab the window handle. So pretty much all we need to do there. What am I missing? Oop. I'm missing an actual valid statement is what I was missing. Next, we're actually going to apply our style. So we called this themed window style was the name. So we're actually going to need that. And to do that, we can do try find resource, and we're going to pass in our key. And later we will include this in our application resources. So we're done with that. And now it comes with all the window registration. We're going to override the onApply template, and we're going to register quite a few different methods here. Our window frame, our borders, our caption. So if we go back to our XAML, this is where these template parts come into play with these registration methods. So the first one that we're going to do is our window frame. And this one is fairly simple. We're just going to instantiate our frame field. And the magic happens with get template child, and this will be part window frame. So fairly straightforward. And we're going to do some of the simpler ones first. Let's do register borders. This one is it's simple, but it's long. So let's do this. There we go. Okay. So here we're just getting references to each one of our borders. I talked about this in the XAML. So we had one for top right, bottom left, and then top left, top right, bottom right, bottom left. That's all we're doing with these. And then we actually are going to register border events. So this is going to be a helper method that we are going to write. And this is going to handle our actual mouse events, mouse enter, mouse leave, mouse left button down, things like that. And then we're going to create a window border edge enumeration real quick. So we're going to private enum border edge. And this is just going to be a helper enum that allows us to know which window border edge we are working with inside our methods. Now for our border events, let's create that method. Okay. The first event is going to be mouse enter. Now this is a pretty straightforward piece of code. First, let's rename our parameters. So pretty straightforward. So when our mouse enters the border, which we defined as actual borders in the XAML, we're just going to change the mouse cursor to the appropriate cursor for that border. Now, if you're wondering why there's two case statements for each enumeration value, it's because they share the same cursor. So regardless of whether I'm on the left border, it's the west-east mouse cursor, or if I'm on the right-hand border, it's still the west-east mouse cursor. So it's the same cursor, which is why we have two case statements for each scenario. And then, of course, if we're not working with, depending on the window state, we either want to set the mouse cursor or we want to set it to just the default arrow. The next set of border events is the mouse left button down. So what we actually want to do is when we click on the border, we want to hook up all of that code as well. And this is straightforward as well. Again, we're checking our window state. We don't want to be able to resize the window if the window is maximized. And we also don't want to be able to resize the window if we can't resize it. So that's why we're checking the resize mode. Again, we have our cursor location. That's where our private field comes into play. We're just doing a bunch of work of actually creating our cursor offset, and then down here we assign our private field that value. And again, all of that is based on the current border that we are working with. And then we actually capture the mouse on that specific framework element. So again, pretty straightforward. The last piece of code, well, second to last actually, is the longest. And this one really is what actually does the work. So we've captured the mouse previously when we click down on the border. And now when we move our mouse, again, checking some things to make sure that we're not resizing the window when it shouldn't be. But now we're actually doing the work of resizing the window based on which border we're using. So you have to understand, first and foremost, how resizing a window works. If I take this Visual Studio window, for example, if I click on the left-hand border and I resize the window, two things actually happen. The width of the window changes, of course, we can see that. But the other thing that happens is the actual left screen position of the window changes as well. We're not just changing the width, we're actually moving the window's left-hand position, its X coordinate on the screen. If I click the right-hand side border, only one thing happens. I'm only modifying the width, and the position of the window in X coordinates stays the same. So if you look through this code here, we have some of that you can see. So we have two types of changes. We have a negative change and a positive change, and it works for both horizontal resizing and vertical resizing, because the same thing happens for vertical resizing. If I resize the window from the top down, I'm not only decreasing the height of the window, but I'm moving the Y position and screen coordinates of the window's location. So just important to know, that's all this code does. There's nothing else to it. I guess the last thing I want to mention is we also check the minimum width and the minimum height. That way we can never resize the window down to 0, and also so we can never resize it into a negative value and throw an exception. The last event is our mouse left button up, which is simple. We just want to release the mouse capture. And that actually concludes our border events. So now we can move on to doing our caption. So let's move that down here. I like to just keep my methods organized in alphabetical order, just for easy reading. So the caption, a little bit of code. This code is fairly straightforward as well. Basically, what this code does is we want to make sure that we're not clicking on a null caption. And we could do the same thing for our borders. I don't think I checked for null values on our borders, but you should. And what we're doing is our mouse left button down, we're going to set our private field we declared earlier, restore top, to the y coordinate value of our mouse cursor at the time of the event. And then we're also going to do some other checking, like did we double click the title window? Because if we double click not the title window, the caption. If I double click the caption of a window, it will maximize it. If I double click it again, it will restore it. And that's basically what this restore top is for. For some reason there was a bug in my code where if I double click the window and maximize it, the y coordinate position of the window is now 0. So if I were to double click this again, in my code, it would put the window always at the top like this. What I wanted to do was I wanted to have the window, no matter where I had it on the screen, in relation to its y coordinate. If I double click the window to maximize it, and again to restore it, I wanted it to restore at the same y coordinate. And that's what that restore top field does. This just makes sure, hey, we're going to restore our window back to the y coordinate when we originally maximized the window. So that's all this code does, is it checks, did we double click the window with 2 mouse clicks, was it the left mouse button, and can I actually perform this operation? And then we set the window state accordingly. Finally, we have drag move, which allows us to move the window. So if I click down on the caption while it's maximized, I should be able to restore the window and move it around. And I should be able to maximize it again. And then caption our mouse move event, again, drag move, sets our restore top value. That's all that code does. Our next event we have are 3 caption buttons. So the easiest one, let's do minimize. This is pretty straightforward. Let's create all 3 of these methods real quick. And we'll go ahead and start with close. This event is pretty straightforward as well. And a button. And again, we're just hooking up to the click event, and we close our window. For our maximize button, again, we just want to maximize or restore the window. And then for our minimize button, just our minimize functionality. Okay, so the very last thing we need to do is the biggest hiccup in borderless forms in WPF is that when you maximize the window, it covers the taskbar. To circumvent this issue, we need to register a window procedure for the window, and we need to implement a Windows message for get, minimize, and maximize info. So we actually need to do some interop here. And this is also going to be in our source initialized event up here. So we're going to actually create some brackets for this. And we're going to do hwin source, which is also in system.windows.interop. And we're going to say from hwin our window handle. And we're going to say let's add a hook, new hwin source, and one clock. And then we can generate our window procedure. So if you've ever written C++ or native code, or if you've ever worked with Windows forms, you should be very familiar with the window procedure. This is actually the message loop for the window that processes window messages. So I've done this quite a few times. The specific window message that we want to listen for, I don't remember the actual constant name for it, but it's 0024. We want to say wget and max info. Okay, and then we want to return ptr 0. And now we want to generate our wmin max info method. And this code is pretty straightforward, although it does require a little bit of knowledge about Win32 and how things work in Windows. And we need to declare all these different structures as well. Basically what this code does is when our window is minimized, or excuse me, when our window is maximized, we get this message, we intercept it, and we process it, and we actually get the working area of the monitor that the window is on. And the working area is defined as the area of your monitor minus the taskbar or any other application bars. And that's what we're doing. We're getting the dimensions that we can actually have, and we set our window's width and height and position based on that working area. The whole purpose of that is so that it does not cover the taskbar when it's maximized. So we need to import some namespaces, system runtime interop services, and then we actually need to add a class to our project, and let's call this native methods. And this can be an internal class, don't need it to be public. And inside here, we're just going to have all of these Win32 structures. So we'll have our actual structures. And then two methods, get monitor info and monitor from window. So this returns the monitor that we're on, whether it's a primary or a secondary monitor, based on the location of the window, basically. Get monitor info will return things like the working area, and then all of our point structures and everything, we use those to actually set the working area. So there we go. Project should compile at this point, and it does. And if we run our project, let's see what happens. Okay, so the one thing we did forget is we actually have to go to our window, and we actually have to, well, first let's go to our application XAML file, and I will show you, we'll include this as a resource. So we're going to say source dictionary, merge dictionaries, source, and then we'll say window style.xaml. Okay, so we're including our window control template and the brushes as a application level resource. We can see that now in the designer. Looks a little ugly. And let's see, what else did we need to do? I believe that's, oh, last thing we need to do. We need to go to our window in the code, or excuse me, the XAML, and we'll go to the code here in a second. We need to declare a local namespace, and this will be just the root of our project. And the reason we do this is now we need to change our XAML from a window to, oops, I have the insert key on. There we go. Local to our themed window. Same thing for the end tag. And we need to do the same exact thing in the code. Just change the derived class to themed window. Build a project. Should compile. Run a project. Let's see, our border is null, so we did something wrong in our XAML probably. Part window border left. That looks correct. So if we go we part window border left. Oop, okay, we forgot we needed previously, I actually paused the video, I had this set as X name. On our style, this actually needed to be X key. That was the problem. So it couldn't find the control template for our window style. So now that we have that corrected, the next error that was actually going to happen is we did forget to create the 3 converters for our visibility. So we need to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call this themed window converters. And we're just going to create all 3 converters inside here. Internal class. And again, our 3 converters were maximize visibility converter. We also had minimize visibility converter. So this would be min. And then our last one was we do not need a converter for the close buttons actually, so let's just get rid of that. And I think these are the main 2 that we'll need. Now we need to implement the interface I value converter. We'll implement that. We'll do the same thing here. Okay, and we don't need to implement convert back, but we do need to implement convert. And these are pretty simple little converters. So for maximize, we want to return the resize mode. Equal to no resize, or can minimize visibility collapsed, visibility invisible. Okay, so based on whether or not we can resize our window, we'll determine whether or not we can minimize our window or not, because one of the resize modes is what can minimize. So same thing from let's see. That was okay. Can, because in WPF can minimize works for minimize and maximize. So from the minimize converter, we're going to do a similar thing. Except we're going to use the no resize and then visibility collapsed. Visible. Okay. And now if we run our project, let's see what happens. Hopefully we did not forget anything else. Oh. Kind of jumping the gun here. We need to actually include those as a resource in the style. So again, we'll do local. Converter key, and then we'll just use the same name, and we'll do minimize and rebuild our project. Maximize visibility converter. Looks correct. What am I missing here? Okay, let's check again. And oop, we have a misspelling. So it was maximize. and minimize. Okay, and we also need to have a unique key, and that would help quite a bit as well. Okay, so we have a window, and as you can see, we have our gray borders, our blue caption, our buttons. Of course, we have a transparent background, so if we want to, we can go to our window style here, and let's just change the background to white, for example. Run our project, and let's see, allows transparency. Yes, so let's go ahead and keep that as transparent, or excuse me, white. And then in our grid, or our content presenter doc panel, we can say background is equal to template binding of background. Let's see if that works. It does not. We have, let's see here, we have one of our borders mixed up somehow. Board brush. Row 2 and 1. That's what we have wrong, I believe. There we go. Okay, so let's just make sure that everything's good and dandy at this point. So let's go to our main window, get rid of our white background, and let's see if we can get that to come through on our template. So we'll set the background, the button. I don't know if this will work or not, but it does. Okay, so let's go ahead and minimize this. So we can see I can move the window. I can resize it, top and bottom, left and right, of course. Okay, so all of our resize functionality is there. I can double click the caption, it should maximize. And again, it's not covering our taskbar. I should be able to drag it away out of a maximized state and put it back. And you'll notice when I'm maximized, the cursor doesn't change on the borders now. And you could write a template to actually collapse the borders when it's maximized if you want. You should be able to click our buttons up here. Restore, maximize, minimize, restore. So full window capability in WPF wasn't too bad. And again, you can make it look pretty much however you want. So I will put the demo project, I will package that up and post that with the video. Again, a lot of this was from code snippets because there was quite a bit of code to go through, and I wanted to keep the video close to about 30 minutes, but it looks like we went over at 49. So let me know what you think. Definitely want your feedback, comments, concerns, questions. If you have troubles customizing the window how you see fit, let me know and I'd be more than happy to help. Custom windows in WPF are not that bad, and I think I covered all of the little edge cases and scenarios for full window functionality. If I left something out or missed something, let me know. Thanks for watching.